High in the Caucasus Mountains, where the land rises into sharp edges, and ancient stone towers watch over deep river valleys. Stories have traveled through generations, like echoes carried by the wind. These mountains, rugged and unforgiving, have long been home to legends of heroes, warriors, and gods who shaped the land itself. In the folklore of Georgia's Highlands, there is a story about a contest, a challenge between a man and monsters. The creatures were known as devebi, terrifying ogres who once ruled the mountains. And the man who dared to face them was not entirely human. He was a hero, a protector of the Highlands, a demigod whose strength was said to rival the mountains themselves. His name was Kopala. In one legendary tale, Kopala stood before a valley with the fate of the land resting on a single throw. A contest of strength, a test between mankind and monsters. And the weapon that would decide it all was a boulder. Tonight, witches and wanderers, we travel to the mountains of Georgian mythology, to the story of Kopala, the hero who defeated the ogres and claimed the land for mankind. Hello, and welcome back, witches and wanderers, to the Morbid Witch Podcast, where we explore myths, folklore, and the strange legends that linger in the shadows of cultures around the world. Each episode, we dive into stories of ancient gods, wandering spirits, and legendary figures whose tales shape the traditions of the people who told them. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, it's always good to have you back. To all my witches and wanderers, thank you for being here. Before we begin tonight's story, just a quick reminder. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me which myth or legend you'd like to hear about next. And if you're listening on Spotify, please take a moment to leave a rating for the podcast. It helps more witches and wanderers discover the show. You can listen to the Morbid Witch Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. So wherever you prefer to explore the strange and mysterious, the stories are waiting. Now, let's travel to the mountains of Georgia. In the Highland region of Peshavi, deep in the mountains of Georgia, Kopala is remembered as a protector of humanity. In Georgian folklore, Kopala is often described as a heroic demigod, a powerful warrior who defended villages and travelers from monstrous creatures. But the monsters of these legends were not simple beasts. They were the devebi. The devebi were giants or ogres in Georgian mythology. Massive beings known for their immense strength and destructive power. In many stories, the devebi lived in fortresses carved into the mountains. From these strongholds, they terrorized the surrounding lands. Villagers feared them. Travelers avoided their territories, and the mountains themselves seemed to belong to these monstrous beings. But then came Kopala. Unlike ordinary men, Kopala possessed incredible strength and courage. He was said to carry weapons capable of defeating creatures that no human warrior could face alone. Over time, his legend spread across the Highlands, He became not just a hero, but a symbol of resistance against the chaos that threatened the human world. And one of the most famous stories about Kopala begins with a challenge. A contest that would decide who truly ruled the mountains. According to legend, Kopala once encountered a group of devebi in the mountains. Rather than beginning with battle, the creatures proposed a contest, a test of strength. Each participant would throw a massive boulder across a wide valley. Whoever could throw their stone the farthest would prove their power. The champion of the devebi stepped forward first. The ogre lifted a tremendous boulder and hurled it across the valley with enormous force. The stone soared through the air, crossing the River and crashing onto the mountain on the far side. The ogres roared with approval. It was a tremendous throw, one that seemed impossible to surpass. Then it was Kopala's turn. He picked up a boulder and tested its weight. But after holding it for a moment, he shook his head. The stone was too light. Instead, Kopala picked up another boulder. Then he pressed the second stone against the first, holding both together in his arms. 2 boulders, twice the weight, and with a powerful motion, Kopala hurled them across the valley. For a moment, it seemed as though the stones might fall short of the ogre's throw. The valley was wide, and even Kopala's immense strength might not be enough. But in that critical moment, another force intervened. Before we see how the contest ends, let's pause for just a moment. To all my witches and wanderers listening tonight, thank you for being here. If you're enjoying this episode and you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening on Spotify, leaving a rating for the podcast helps more witches and wanderers discover the show. You can listen to the Morbid Witch Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. Now, let's return to the mountains of Georgian legend. As Kopala's stones sailed through the air, it became clear they might not surpass the ogre's throw. But just before the boulders began to fall, a god intervened. The deity Kaveria struck the flying stones with his whip. The divine strike gave the stones new force. They flew farther than anyone expected, crossing the valley and crashing directly onto the fortress of the devebi. The fortress was known as 66Kopala, a stronghold where the ogres had ruled the mountains. Kopala's boulders struck the fortress with devastating power. Stone shattered, walls collapsed, and the ogres realized something terrifying. They had lost the contest. After the contest ended, the conflict between Kopala and the devebi did not simply fade away. The ogres, furious at their defeat, launched an attack, but Kopala fought back. With the help of divine forces like Kaveria, the hero led the battle against the monstrous beings that had dominated the land for so long. The battle raged through the mountains, and in the end, the devebi were defeated. The surviving ogres fled underground, retreating into the depths of the earth, where they could no longer threaten the surface world. Their disappearance marked a turning point. The mountains were no longer ruled by monsters. Humans could finally settle the land. Villages grew, communities formed, and the story of Kopala became part of the identity of the Highlands themselves. In Georgian tradition, Kopala remains one of the great heroic figures of the Caucasus Mountains. He represents strength, protection, and the triumph of humanity over the chaos of monstrous forces. Stories about Kopala were passed down through generations, especially in the Highland regions where the landscape itself feels ancient and powerful. Massive stones scattered across the mountains were sometimes said to be the very boulders thrown in legendary contests. Whether literal or symbolic, these stories helped explain the land. The mountains were not simply rock and earth. They were places where gods and heroes had once walked. Places where battles between humans and monsters shaped the world that followed. And in those stories, Kopala stood at the center. The hero who proved that even giants could be defeated. Across cultures, myths often tell stories about the moment when humanity claimed its place in the world. Sometimes those stories involve battles against monsters. Sometimes they involve clever tricksters or powerful gods, but the message is often the same. There was once a time when the world was wild and dangerous, and someone had to stand against the chaos. In the mountains of Georgia, that hero was Kopala, the man who threw the stone that changed the fate of the land. Thank you for listening to the Morbid Witch Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're following the show on Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Pandora, so you never miss a story. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. And if you're listening on Spotify, please take a moment to leave a rating for the podcast. It helps more witches and wanderers find their way here. Until next time, stay strange, stay spooky, and remember, the shadows are always watching.